Friends, have you ever been on a date? A perfect, amazing date. And I don't mean April 25th for my Miss Congeniality friends. I mean a genuine great date. They take you to the perfect restaurant. The conversation is flawless. It fills your soul. And then out of nowhere, you say something that can only be described as weird. and you don't know where it comes from, but it's just there. You just say it. And if you're like me, you probably thought about it for the next 2 weeks. But maybe that human's response was the perfect response. Maybe that human's response was exactly what you needed to hear. Maybe that thing that they came back with helped you feel seen and heard. And it let your weirdness be normal. It let that weird thing that you said just be there. And all of its beauty and ugliness, weirdness and worthiness. Friends, that was me on my first date with my husband. We were sitting at the corner of a bar having amazing conversation about sports and weather and whatever you talk about on a first date. And something came over me, and I knew I needed to tell him something about my identity that you wouldn't know just by looking at me. And that's that I'm a survivor of sexual violence. I never thought I would tell him that, especially on our first date. But there I was, sitting at the corner of a bar, vulnerable, but very real. And the response that he gave me back was perfect. It was what I needed to hear. It was the part that helped me become okay with my own story. At this point, you might be like, wow, that's deep for the beginning of this video, but it's important to talk about. Here's some things that you also should probably know about me. My name is Bonny, and I get to travel around the country and tell stories about being a higher ed professional, about being a wife, being a mom, and also being a survivor of sexual violence. And as I travel, I get to hear other people's stories too and help them fall in love with their story. Now, maybe you have a story like mine, or maybe you know someone who has a story like this. And for some reason, we're never really quite sure what to say. That's normal, and that's okay. But with April being Sexual Assault Awareness Month, it's important that we start thinking about and processing how we would respond when someone tells us that they are a survivor. It's not really a matter of if, it's a matter of when. 20% of college-aged women and 6% of college-aged men will be survivors of sexual violence in their lifetime. It's 1 in 5 and 1 in 6. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Not only that, but 80% of those crimes of sexual violence are perpetrated by someone they know. It's called an acquaintance-based assault. Now, I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, I was always taught to be afraid of the person in the woods late at night, or to be nervous or uncomfortable walking to my car, to look out for the big white van, stranger danger. But 80% of the time, these are people we know, and these are people we love. And that's what makes this really difficult to process and understand is we know these people. But as we grow up, we're only taught to think about strangers. We're only taught to think about the people we don't know doing this. And then finally, another statistic that's important for you to know is that 90% of these reports, these cases, go unreported. People are not going to the authorities. They're not going to police. They're not going to anyone. But I guarantee you they are going to come to you. They are going to have conversation with you about this. And if you identify as a friend or a fraternity brother, a sorority sister, or maybe just somebody they've known for a really long time, or maybe even just a short time, like on a first date, you need to be prepared of what to say back. Because what you say can either set them on the road to a recovery or make them be silent for a very long time about their story. And that's exactly how I was. When this happened to me as a sophomore in college, I told very few people. And the people I did tell, their response made me clam up, made me uncomfortable, it made me feel shame. It made me question my own story, my own beliefs of what happened. It made me feel alone. But then when I told my husband, Chris, on our first date, his response made him my superhero. I want you to be someone else's superhero. Because as we sat there on that corner of that bar and tears were streaming down my face, he did this really good guy move. He grabbed the bottom of the stool and scooted it closer to him and put his arm on the back of the chair. And at that point, I was like, well, we can just, make out or whatever. It's fine. But the two things that he said set me on the road to my recovery. And the first thing that he told me was, it's not your fault, which I so desperately needed to hear. Because I hadn't heard that at this point. When I first told the people that I told you their response made me shut down, made me quiet. And it made me keep this a secret for 3,136 days. It's over 7 years of living with the secret of being a survivor because I was afraid to tell other people about it. I didn't want to get that same response that I had gotten from those few friends before. Chris showed me that it wasn't my fault. And just hearing those words out loud allowed me to realize that. The second thing he said to me was a question. And it was one of the most powerful questions I've ever been asked. How can I support you? Friends, it is very easy for us to assume that we want to give advice. Assume that that person wants to hear what we have to say. We want to ask questions. That's normal. Sexual assault is such a taboo topic. Sex in general is a taboo topic. And when we're growing up, we're taught not to really talk much about it. We're taught that sex should be something that's between two people behind a closed door, and not everyone should be involved in that. But what happens when there's a story, an ugly story that's behind it? If someone tells you that they are a survivor, you asking questions only gives you clarity. It doesn't necessarily help the survivor. You don't need to ask questions in that moment. Just listen. Asking a survivor how you can support them allows them to feel powerful. It allows them to have the ball back in their court in an area where they were not able to make a decision, where they weren't able to have power. Give survivors their power back. Ask that simple question. And if you're not really sure what to say after that, I need you to believe, listen, refer, and support. Simply believe a survivor. When someone tells you their story, maybe in depth or maybe just superficially saying something happened and I don't really know what to do with it, just believe them. Sometimes even saying the word, I believe you. I hear you. I see you. Allows them to feel seen and heard and believed in a way that maybe they never thought was possible. Listen to their story. Listen to their feelings. Listen to their emotion. It takes a lot of courage to listen instead of asking questions or giving advice. Just sit in silence and listen. The third thing is refer. Understand your resources. Understand the resources that either are in your community, in your area, or even on your university campus if you're a college student. Understanding your resources and referring individuals and survivors to those resources is vital. There are professionals who do this work for free through nonprofits, through university offices, through so many different settings that can support you and support them. Which leads to the last part of support. Understand that if someone comes to you with this story, they come to you with a survivor story and they want to talk to you about it, you may feel a little bit of weight from that, and that's okay. That weight is a normal weight, and you should never feel selfish or guilty for feeling some weight. But make sure that you're checking in on yourself. Make sure that you're checking in on how your emotions are doing, how your mental state is doing, because you cannot fully support a survivor if you are not okay either. Finally, support them. Ask them how you can support them, and be okay if the answer is, I don't know. Because maybe you're then able to refer them to that counselor, that office on campus, or these other places. But support for yourself and for this survivor is vital. Friends, you can be the gold for another person. When pottery is broken in Japan, The artist will collect as many pieces as it can and put it back together with pure gold. The art is called kintsugi, and they are some of those highly sought after, beautiful pieces of art. I need you to be the gold for survivors. I need you to be the person that puts those broken pieces back together with pure gold, add to their beauty, their value, their influence, and remind them that they are worthy. And maybe you identify as a survivor. Maybe you have a story similar to mine. But I think it's important that you realize that you can be the gold for yourself too. You can fill those cracks with gold. You're not broken. You're badass and worthy. And regardless of what your story is or what stories you've heard, we have to be prepared to support survivors. So during April Sexual Assault Awareness Month, do some research. But above all, believe, listen, refer, and support. If you have other questions, feel free to find me. www.bonnyshade.com. You can also email me at bonnyshadebb@gmail.com or follow along on Instagram at bonnyshadebb. Thanks, y'all. Happy Sexual Assault Awareness Month.